Hello again. Welcome to 30 Minutes to Merge. I'm your host, Matt Desmond, aka Beard VDU. And today I'm going to be joined by one Jed Verity. As always, I like to introduce my guest prior to having them pop in. So a couple of things. If you've catched the show before, you know that I ask a couple of random questions. If you've never joined and this is your first time, first off, welcome. Second, hopefully you enjoy the questions that I ask. So typically I ask them what kind of hobbies they have, and Jed is a huge baker. He just told me what he made. It's a Japanese milk bread. I believe it's called shotopan. I probably butchered that pronunciation, but that's the go-to when he's making bread. But he likes to mill his own grain and stuff, so obviously he's really into the bread making gimmick. They do currently have a cat. It's kind of old. It's 19 years old. He grew up as a dog person, so if you're a dog person, he is one of us. However, he's also kind of converted to the dark side and enjoys hanging out with cats, including having up to 4 while I lived in a tiny apartment in San Francisco. So shout out to 6 people in a small apartment. In terms of recent purchases, something that I always like to ask because I think it's interesting. He says it's boring. I think it's great stuff. So he bought some door stops, a dehumidifier, and a shower head. All things that are kind of normal once you get into the home ownership game. But yeah, to me, those are great things to just recently buy, but to others, it probably is kind of boring. He's currently not involved in too many open source projects. He's got his hands full working on GitHub projects at GitHub, and then obviously installing all those domestic purchases, which I can definitely relate to. And then in terms of building a fun action, if you've joined before, you might remember that some people have wanted to troll their children on Twitter or shut the internet off at dinner time so that people are focused on the family and not necessarily what's happening on social media. He decided that he'd want to build some form of a light bulb flashing action that would alert his coworkers whenever he sent them a shout out in a commit or in an issue or something. But unfortunately, none of his coworkers have given him access to their IoT. So when that happens, he's going to be flashing all the lights. But until then, his coworkers are just going to be left in the dark. So with that, I'd love to bring out our guest. So I know he has at least 30 minutes of content, if not more. So Jed, welcome. Thank you very much for joining 30 Minutes to Merge today.
Thank you, sir. Very happy to be here with everybody today. As you heard, I am Jed Verity, an engineer here at GitHub, currently working on our projects, product, and feature set. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that here today. So I have just 1.5 slides that I'd like to share. Sorry, as I look over to the side, make sure we got everything. Right. So the official title of this presentation is Engineers to VPs, Accelerate Shipping with GitHub Projects. And I just wanted to dissect that a little bit to manage expectations. So first of all, I do not have any magical incantations or tooling or process that will reduce your shipping time by some percentage. The opinion behind this is that through streamlining your processes and giving people nice, focused, clean interfaces to work with, you will, in effect, ship faster than you have been. The way we're going to do that, there are many ways to do that, but the way we're going to talk about is using GitHub Projects. And I'm going to show you here just some really high-level places that you can go to learn more, because I'm going to just speed through some stuff today, and there's a lot more going on with projects. And then the final part, engineers to VPs. If you read my blog post, which I assume most of you have not, I'll include a link for that also. You know that to me, one of the most compelling things about GitHub Projects is that it's not especially opinionated about a particular workflow or style like Agile and so forth. It's really a collection of primitives in what I hope is an intuitive interface that you can then compose into whatever kinds of experiences you want. What that means is it's very useful, I believe, for everybody from individual contributors, engineers, designers, and so forth, up through managers, directors, VPs, and beyond, because you can just dial in whatever particular experience you're looking for. So with that, let me see if I can start sharing my screen and take you through some of this. I'm going to show you a few things, and then we are going to jump into a demo of sorts. I'll explain that more in a second. Okay, so to start with, want to just give you some places you can go to look at some things. If you haven't been here, this is our marketing page for issues and projects. And this is the splashiest way to just get a quick glimpse at some of our most compelling features, although I'll show some of them to you today. There's a video that's fun to watch, these high-level overview of features like toggling between board and table, subtasks in Markdown, a command palette for super users. I'm not going to show this today, but almost everything can be controlled via the keyboard with this command palette. Custom fields, which we will show today. Insights to track the life cycle of your issues. And finally, workflow automation, which maybe we'll do a little bit today, but not too much. For those who really want to dig in, there's a docs site that shows you more than you'll ever want to read. And then finally, a blog post that is the context for this session today. But I have nothing else to show you in the way of slides or marketing material. What I really want to do is share a different screen now. And we are going to build a project from scratch together as what I hope will be the best way to really meaningfully there we go. That's the one. Give you a sense of how this all works and how it's useful for engineers and managers, directors, VPs alike. So for our demo today, I've created this organization. There is nothing particularly interesting in here about what GitHub may or may not be building. I'm logged in just with one of my alter egos that I use for demoing and for testing things. And we're going to build a project in this organization. And the project we are going to build is going to be focused on this fake feature to notify users when their posts get reactions. Right now, if you go to an issue and react to it, the only way the author of that issue or comment can know that you've done that to get their dopamine hit is to go to the issue and just refresh. And I'm not saying it's a good idea to notify on all reactions, but that's the core concept that we're going to work with today to make it so that you can receive notifications. So if you go to your organization or to your user account, you should have a projects tab. And traditionally, this has had our Kanban board style version of projects, which was very limited and frankly, in my view, not terribly useful. Just recently, we have shipped this V2 version of projects that I'm showing here today, and it's much, much more useful, and it is growing quickly. We try to ship twice a week, new features and fixes, and so that's what we're going to use today. Okay, so when you start a new project, you can do this, by the way, at the organization level like I am right now, or inside of a repo. But I'm doing one for the whole org because I'm thinking maybe this eventually could include issues and pull requests across multiple repos. You come in, you create a new one, and you are presented with this option to select a template, but I'm not going to do that today. There are more of these coming, by the way, eventually, but for now, we're just going to start completely from scratch, clean slate, and see what it's like to get started. So I'm going to just start a brain dump in here of what I think might help us get started building notifications for reactions. And the way that I like to start, as I know many folks do, is with a user story. This is probably familiar to many of you here, but for those of you who are not familiar with that, it's a way to articulate something from the perspective of the user so that you're not prejudicing based on particular implementation details or anything like that. You're just trying to capture the value to a user. So as a user, I would like to be notified when someone reacts to my post. All right, that is our first story. And I immediately begin to have questions about how this is actually going to work. So for example, are we going to notify on every single reaction? Should we batch notifications or send once a day so they don't get overwhelmed? And see, I'm just dumping these thoughts right now, total serializing my thought process into what are called draft issues. I'm going to put some more in here in a second, but let's take a quick sidebar, as it were, for draft issues, because this is a new concept for GitHub. It does not map to any repo. You cannot find these currently via repo. They exist only in the project space, and they're kind of an issue light. So you have a description field where you can put in some details. You can add assignees and put a status on it, but that's basically it. So I'm not going to get too much into that now, just to let you know that that's what these are. And we'll convert some of these to real issues in just a minute. So what other questions do I have here? Should we group notifications by emoji? Bunch of these questions coming out. And in my mind, I have this view of, all right, there's going to be notifications showing up in this notifications view, which you can get to by clicking the bell. And so I'm trying to map my vision for what this is. And there'd be other people involved if it's our whole team working on this, product managers, designers, and so forth. So I'm trying to figure out how this is going to work. And ultimately, for now, to ship soon and to not try to over-engineer or overthink this, I'm thinking that all we should do to prevent the onslaught of notifications is just let users opt in or out of this. And so I think this is another user story. And this will be our like V1 of this feature. As a user, I would like to toggle notifications on and off. Okay, so as I'm serializing my thoughts into this project, I'm starting to see that there are some different kinds of thoughts and different kinds of issues appearing. And so just to keep the interface clean and focused, I'm going to create a new field that we'll just call category for now. I'm going to make it a single select so that I can pick from a list. And we'll just say right now we have two kinds of things. We have a story and we have a question. I don't know that which question will survive for the whole duration of the project, but at least helps me separate these things out. So I'm going to tag these all for now with what category they fall into. And then I'm going to use our group by feature to split this up in the interface. This gives me kind of a cleaner way to see what we're really talking about here. And at this point, I could keep filling up with questions, but I want to start moving forward a little bit. And so the first thing I'm going to do is map a feature to each of these stories. Sometimes stories have multiple features that are necessary to ship in order to execute on the story. But for now, let's just say there's kind of one each. So I'm going to pop it in here for starters and just say there's one feature for this first story, which is just show a notification in the notifications UI after a reaction. Not saying it's the best wording, but let's call it that for now. And you can see I'm putting it in the stories group for now, which doesn't make sense. So I think we've got a new category here. Let's actually add a feature category. And that seems more important than question. So I'm going to save that, go back, call this a feature. And all right, now I've got that new group. And then there's another one, which is just like toggle reaction notification settings. Okay, so now I'm expecting this feature to be maybe the longest living item in this project, that like this won't go away until the feature is actually shipped. So I'm feeling quite certain that this needs to be an issue that we're tracking in the repo. And so this is one way to do it. There are a number of ways, but I'll just show you this simplest one for now, which is to click on this context menu, convert to issue, pick your repo. Repo in this organization is called GitHub. I'm going to convert this one also. And now I have full featured issues available to me. And I could click to it in the classic interface if I wanted to, or view it in this sidebar. And I've got all the things here that I would expect to see from a full-fledged issue. And now that I'm looking at these, I'm realizing for this demo, I will not have the time to flesh out all of these. And so I'm going to focus on the simpler one, which is this notification settings. And to do that, I'm going to create a separate tab that's a little more focused. I'm going to call this overview because this has just everything in it. Could be good for searching and filtering. Then I'm going to create a view that is just focused on, well, I'll tell you what, let's create one that is by feature. And this would be a nice way for us to encapsulate the work connected with the two features. But to do that, I don't have any way to really meaningfully group these into separate buckets yet. You can't group by like issue parent or ID yet. And so what I'm going to do for now is just create a feature field. And let's make that a single select. One is notifications. That's our first one. I'm just trying to boil this down as like an abbreviation. The other one is settings. And let's actually just categorize these all in their relevant features. And these are really kind of more connected into notifications for now. So let's go back into feature and let's add that field and group by it. This gives us a way to just encapsulate by the feature. I don't know if this is necessarily useful to folks, although it gives us a sense of what scope of issues are there for each of the features. There's this option here. When you see the blue dot, that means we have a dirty state for the settings in the view, and I can save that so that everybody who visits this view will see the same thing. Let's sort it the other way so that settings is at the top. Save that again. Okay, so this gives us an overview of the features, but now let's actually scope down to just the one that we're going to work on for this demo. And the way you do that is to go into the filter bar. You can also use Command F and just filter on the things you want to see here. And in this case, we know we have this feature field and we're just interested in the settings feature. And so I'm going to keep this view filtered to that. And I'm going to group this to make it a little clearer in a second. But let's start filling this up again a little bit. We've got a story that helps give us context. We've got the feature that's going to be our longest running top level item. And now what are some of the other things that come to mind for this? First of all, I'm thinking we're going to need this to show up in the interface somewhere in the GitHub experience. And my guess is maybe this is going to be here in this notification settings, but I'm not sure. This is not my job per se. I'm an engineer. I may have input, but let's just create an issue for this. Design the UI UX for the notification toggle. All right, so I know we're going to need to do that. From the engineering side, I'm starting to decompose the work that this will require, and I can think of a few different things. First, we're going to need to post this toggle choice to our API so that it can be persisted. We are also going to need to get the toggle choice to show it when the user lands on that settings screen. Get the toggle choice to show on the settings screen. And then related to those, we need to persist the choice, persist toggle choice in a data store somewhere. Probably a database, but anyway, just know we need to do that somewhere. Okay, and so now I'm looking at these again and saying, these are definitely some different kinds of issues now, and it's not helpful to just look at all of this in a flat list. So I'm seeing some clear design and engineering tasks. And so let's just create some more categories for now to bucket these a little more clearly. Okay. This is a design task. This is an engineering task. Engineering. Designer probably doesn't care about these. And so let's now bucket by these to make it clear. Okay, so now this interface is starting to become useful for executing on everything necessary to deliver this feature. I can see the story that's driving it, the feature that's tracking it, design work, engineering work, and so forth. As an engineer, I'm most interested in the engineering section. So I have some questions now about these issues that are drilling into the actual implementation. For example, do we already have an endpoint we can use for this in the API, or do we need a new one? And do we have a table or column in a database that we can use, or do we need a new one? Now, I could categorize these as questions, but now I'm feeling like my questions category is not that useful anymore. It's like, are they engineering questions, product questions, which feature are they related to? And so I'm starting to recognize that these actually are the kinds of questions that lead to ADRs. An ADR, if you're not familiar, is an architectural design decision record, and it is a way to focus and surface conversation and ultimately decisions about what kind of architecture we're going to design or leverage. And this is it's an engineering concern. It often comes out of engineering, but it's pretty useful to surface because people who are onboarding a project, sometimes even technical project managers and project management, product managers and project management folks like to have a clear sense of why did we do that, right? If things are taking a long time and it's because of this decision, why did we even do that? Should we go back to the other? So I kind of like having these surfaced. But now as an engineer, I'm feeling a little bit annoyed that every time I come into our feature view, engineering is like getting pushed down and out of below the fold. And so really what I would like now is an engineering specific view. So let's create that. We will filter by category engineering. And I've realized now that ADR is something I also want to have present in here. Let's bring in the category field, maybe feature also just for good measure. And let's group by that so I can see it. Okay, now this is a nice, more condensed view, and we have some things we can begin to operationalize. So for example, these ADR questions are good discovery level work that we can get started on. So I'm gonna turn this into an actual issue, put it in the GitHub repo as well. Let's do both of these. And then I'd like to link these also into the issues that they relate to. And I expect this is going to be my task or somebody's task eventually. And so let's create issues out of all of these. And let's start to put statuses on them. And you know what? I'm feeling like I don't want to keep having to add the to-do. I want it to just by default to put a to-do status on there. So we have this workflow already in place. When an issue or pull request is added to the project, automatically set it to do. So I'm going to enable that. Come back here. I do have to do these though, since they're already created. Okay. And now let's just go ahead and link these into the issues that they're relevant to. So in this case, toggling posting to the API is relevant to this question of whether we have an endpoint or not. Here I'm using task lists, which again give us some bidirectional linking across issues automatically, and we can close them and see their status here from the issue that they're embedded in. That ADR is also relevant to this issue. Include the checkbox just so that we can actually check them off here. You could still just put a bullet point in there if you wanted to, if you preferred that. And then the persistence ADR is related to this. Okay. All right. So these are linked together now, and it's feeling like we can start rolling on this. And let's say that I know for sure under my alter ego Gozer Zool that I'm going to be the one to do this discovery work. At this point, I can come in here and see everything pretty clearly. We can use a board view if we prefer to actually have a more Kanban-like experience to task this out and track progress. But what I personally like to do, and I know a bunch of engineers like to do, is to have a me tab, or in some cases, a me board. And having this view filtered by assignee me gives us a focused place to say, what is on my list of things to do, just me. And everybody can use this since the assignee is not hard-coded. It uses the special me filter. And I may choose to group this by status or by other dimensions. You can also have this set up differently across table and board views. But I'm not going to go too deep in that for now, just going to point out the value in having this. Now, here is one little optimization that may or may not be relevant to everybody on this call. We have some teams using this and other teams that are not using this. To show this off well, I'm going to actually also create a design view filtered by design, put it over here. And basically the workflow goes like this. If a design individual or team wants to be able to focus on their work, they may want to scope this board strictly to design, or they may want to see some parent context so that they can easily jump in and out of the feature issue, for example. Or in engineering, you may want to jump in and out of the ADR, for example, right? And so we want to try to include context that doesn't require flipping through tabs and trying to find the right issue in the right place. But there are some issues with this, right? Like if design is only going to be working on settings and it's seeing all features that have been added to this board, we have, for starters, an additional filtering opportunity here. So let's start here and just add in this first approach of filtering only by settings. That's useful. It gives us only the things we want to be concerned about for now. And we can do the same thing here on the engineering side, because maybe engineering would also like to see the feature. There's some requirements in there and other conversation that's useful to refer to. But there's also another way that, like, especially if you're working on multiple things at the same time, or you've got a lot going on in your view, here is an optimization that may help. It requires some setup, but once you've got it, you can use it pretty regularly without additional legwork. And the idea here is to actually enrich our status options with values that can indicate readiness for a particular team to work on a given issue. So the way I'm going to do this for now is just say, all right, we've got a feature phase, which is defining requirements. And maybe this is all or mostly on the product team. Then once it's gotten there, it is ready for design. By the way, this all kind of suggests a waterfall method that is not always realistic or desirable. But again, just for the sake of the demo, this can illustrate a valuable workflow. Then maybe we have design in progress. Then for the feature, we have ready for engineering. Then we have engineering in progress. And then maybe we have ready to ship. And finally, shipped. Okay. So now that we have created these, by the way, let's create a better name for this. All right, so now, rather than just focusing on a particular feature, which may still be useful, we can decide what states, which life cycle phases do we care about? Which life cycle phases signal that we are or should be engaged? And so for this, I'm going to say, like, let's keep our just generic life cycle phases for now, but then we want to add in these other ones. And what I care about is, I don't need to be involved in defining requirements, let's say, but when it says, when it's ready for design, I need to be paying attention. And then of course, same thing with design in progress. And so these are the issues I care about. These are the phases that I care about as a designer or design team. And so if we come back to our feature here, it currently has no status and it's not showing up in our design tab. And if it were in defining requirements, it would still not show up in that tab. But as soon as, let's say, a product manager is finished with that and says, okay, we've got everything we need, it's time to take it into design, then all of a sudden it shows up here and suggests that we are ready to go. And the same thing can be done over here in the engineering side. And so let's scope our statuses to do and in progress and done. And in this case, we want feature ready for engineering and feature engineering in progress. And we probably would end up wanting some of those other statuses too, like ready to ship and shipped and so forth. Again, all of this filtering work here, which is admittedly a bit gnarly, you can just persist into your view so that you only have to do it once. So now designers are working on it, and it gets put into in progress, still working on it, and then finally says, great, now we are ready for design. The feature disappears from their view, and it shows up here and ready for engineering. And of course, we may say, well, actually, we've worked on this, but there is still something necessary to be done here, comes back into design, so on and so forth. Doesn't work for everybody, for every workflow, but in really busy boards and environments, it can be a nice way to just focus only the content that you care about. Okay, so I'm close to the end of time that we have available for this, but I want to show one last feature, one last workflow that you can use projects for, and that is to bubble up to manager, director, VP level from these same issues without too much additional legwork. So right now we have the me view scoped to an individual engineer or an individual contributor of any kind. We've got the engineering view, which is maybe useful for an engineering team, for a DRI, a directly responsible individual who is leading the work, possibly for the engineering manager. We have design for the individual or team. We have the feature, which can be useful for project managers, also for other managers who want to see the whole scope of what we're working on. And then we have these views, which have questionable value for a particular persona, but which still give us a particular slice and dice of the view. So what I want to create now is something called the org view. And let's put this over here. And at this level, let's say that we as directors and potentially even VPs are not really concerned, don't have time or bandwidth to get into the weeds, and really just want to know, what are we shipping? Are we on track? And when might we ship? And so for this purpose, let's just say for now that really all we want to see are the features that we're shipping. And this could be even rolled up one higher, right? Like especially for VPs, like reaction notifications. But for now, let's just keep it at this grain and say we just care about seeing the features. And what I may care about here first is like target date to ship. So let's create a date field. And let's say this one hasn't even started, so it doesn't have a date, but this one we're shipping tomorrow. Exciting. And another thing we might care about is something we could call health or status. And this is just to show, like, are we on track, or are things in trouble? And do we have enough context to understand why? Do we need more resources, time, or do we need to cut scope? Things like that. And so these are high signal fields for the personas we're dealing with here. And so let's put these towards the front and say, this hasn't started, but it was supposed to. It's way behind. This one's green. Everything's going well. Here's the target date. And maybe we also include here, like, who's the point of contact? Who's the assignee for this feature? That's Dana Barrett for this one. And we can see the status here as well. Ready for design, design in progress, and so forth. And this gives us a pretty good roll-up overall. Now, last thing here for helping at the org level, it's very likely that somebody viewing at this granularity is pretty interested in looking across their teams. So let's pretend we have a whole team dedicated to reactions. We've got a pull requests team and a repos team. And we want to now be able to view and filter by these. We can add in another one like add metrics to pull requests. And that goes to the pull requests team, let's say. And then we can group by these and just have a view across our org. More syntax highlighting. And that's repos. And in this way, somebody at what we call an M2 or higher level managing managers can really see what's happening across the entire org. I'm so sorry for taking us past our stop time. That is the end of the presentation for now. If people are interested in sticking around to ask any questions or go deeper and hack on this together, I'm happy to do that. But yeah, leave it at that for now.
It's pretty dope. Thank you very much for kind of walking us through the new and improved version of GitHub Projects. As someone who's been at GitHub for a hot minute, it's been a blast to kind of watch projects kind of grow and change over the years. And I kind of agree. The Kanban board like worked for like a subset of people, but the new version of projects definitely makes managing your projects a lot easier. And then like being able to like build out draft issues like really quickly as you just kind of like free flow thoughts while you're like kind of figuring out what the project might look like is super dope. So really quickly, there's a comment in chat to continue the discussion at github.co/30 minutes, and that's 30 with two numbers there for an async Q&A where Jed and I will be answering any questions that you might have. It's also a great spot. The GitHub community has a bunch of different discussions happening. So if you don't have any questions on projects, but you do on, say, GitHub Advanced Security or Actions, people are definitely answering questions there as well. But as always, I appreciate Jed. I appreciate you joining us for today, and for all
thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's always a pleasure to show the community what we've been working on. But yeah, if you thanks again for signing in. Again, if this is your first time, hopefully you'll join us again. And if you've been a long time watcher, I appreciate you a whole bunch. So thanks again. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, rest of your week, and have a safe weekend. But thanks all. Have a great one. And that's us.
Thanks,
signing
everybody.
off.